sounds like the monarchy will be shifting in a slightly different direction.
I think it's safe to say that change is on my agenda.
A wave of heartbreak swept through the royal family after Prince William collapsed while hearing Diana's final message, delivered by Princess Anne. The recording left the room frozen and forced William to confront words his mother had preserved until he possessed the authority to act. Honestly, this was not a routine memory or a gentle farewell.
When I started my public life 12 years ago, I understood the media might be interested in what I did, but I was not aware of how overwhelming that attention would become.
Diana warned him about palace control, his future as king, and the need to trust the partner who protected his family when the institution demanded silence. Anne remained steady, but William's composure vanished as the message exposed a history he had never been allowed to examine. What did Diana leave behind? Why did Anne protect it from 1997 until that afternoon? And what final request brought William to his knees? Today, we finally uncover the recording that reopened his deepest wound, shifted the balance inside Windsor Castle, and permanently altered the royal family's future. Inside a private room at Windsor Castle, Diana's voice crossed the table from an analog recorder while William struggled to breathe, his hands locked around the table's edge. Seconds later, his knees struck the floor. The collapse was the end of a chain that began after August 1997, when the palace took control of Diana's public history, and William learned to survive inside its version of events. To understand why this moment shattered Prince William, you have to look at how he was raised after August 1997. Following Diana's death,
who wasn't wearing a seatbelt when she died, had suffered a heart injury in the crash. It appeared that Diana was sitting sideways in the car when it crashed, and that the injury itself wasn't necessarily fatal if the circumstances of Diana's death had been different.
the royal household moved quickly to regain control of the narrative. The palace establishment, guided by senior private secretaries and public relations advisors, constructed a version of history. In that official version, Diana was remembered with quiet respect, but her criticisms of the court were systematically minimized. The institution presented her as an emotionally fragile figure who did not fit the rigid structure of royal life. William learned to accept this framing. Palace operations were presented to the future monarch as necessary, traditional, and permanent. Internal leaks, strategic briefings, and media trades became accepted tools for maintaining public support for the crown. From adulthood through his years as Prince of Wales, William operated within those boundaries. He continued working beside advisors who had previously undermined his mother and watched the palace rehabilitate Camilla's public image. He believed this was all done in the name of stability. He convinced himself that protecting the crown meant accepting the methods of the people running it. But through the message she recorded in August 1997, Princess Diana dismantled that entire foundation. The tape was not a soft farewell, it was an explicit warning. Diana laid out the internal mechanics of the palace, warning her son about the courtiers and communications officials who would try to manage his life and control his future household. Speaking directly into the microphone during the final weeks before her trip to Paris, Diana described how senior courtiers worked with private press teams to trade stories with newspapers. Damaging material about one relative was exchanged for sympathetic coverage of another. Above all, she named the strategy that would be deployed once she was gone: the gradual elevation of Camilla's position at the direct expense of Diana's legacy and her children's standing. That warning was about to enter a room where King Charles and Camilla sat opposite William and Catherine. Charles expected an administrative discussion about future household protocols, while Camilla expected the proposed centralization plan to move forward. Neither knew that Princess Anne was carrying an unedited recording from August 1997. The confrontation began with the private meeting called at Windsor that afternoon. The gathering did not appear in the court circular, and no press notice identified its purpose. Charles had formally arranged the meeting to review estate records and private family material connected to the planned transition. Anne had been invited because the king requested disclosure of privately held papers that could affect the review. He expected routine correspondence or estate notes. Anne accepted without identifying Diana's recording because the centralization proposal had activated the condition attached to the box. Before the meeting, advisors aligned with the King's office had drafted proposals concerning funding, allocations, senior appointments, and press strategy. The central proposal would give Charles's team oversight of the Prince and Princess of Wales's operational budget, senior appointments, and media planning. Camilla had been a key backer of this centralized administrative strategy. Control over press operations and staffing appointments would allow the central office to decide which royals received priority in palace coverage, staffing, and institutional support. It was a classic palace maneuver. Use administrative restructuring to quietly restrict the independence of the Wales office. William had opposed these proposals from their first circulation, but only Charles could withdraw them from the King's office. The old guard of courtiers insisted that centralization was traditional. They argued that the monarch's office must always hold final approval over press strategies, media access, and household access protocols. That was the context when Princess Anne entered the drawing room carrying a worn leather lockbox. Charles, Camilla, William, and Catherine were already seated. The box had remained under Anne's personal control since late 1997. Anne offered no ceremonial introduction and requested no permission from the advisors near the door. She placed the box on the mahogany table. It carried no crown markings because it had never been deposited in the royal archives inside the Round Tower at Windsor Castle. Diana had kept it in private custody, outside formal palace control. Anne held it because duty had defined her public life and private conduct. She avoided court gossip, refused to trade stories with journalists, and kept personal promises separate from palace campaigns. Diana understood that discipline. In the turbulent summer of 1997, following her public divorce and her final break from the palace communications machine, Diana realized that official palace channels could not be trusted with her private documents. Anything deposited into the royal archives would enter a system open to court review and administrative redaction. Diana also rejected traditional estate lawyers because palace advisors could submit requests for access. Diana needed a senior relative capable of independent custody and patient judgment. Anne accepted that responsibility. Their relationship had never depended on public warmth. It rested on direct conversations and a shared distrust of press games during the collapse of the royal marriage. Anne had not joined court gossip or adjusted her conduct to satisfy communications officials. In August 1997, Diana gave Anne the box with a clear instruction. William must receive it only after becoming a husband, a father, and the senior heir capable of protecting his own household. Giving it to him as a teenager would inflict pain without giving him the authority to confront the system described on the tape. Anne kept the box at Gatcombe Park and excluded it from the palace register. She broke that privacy once, in 2021. When Queen Elizabeth reviewed succession papers concerning William's future office, Anne brought the recording to the Queen personally, remained while she listened, and returned it to Gatcombe with Elizabeth's handwritten note sealed inside. Charles, his private secretaries, and Camilla's press team were not informed. Elizabeth's review did not end Anne's duty. William was a husband and father, but he was not yet Prince of Wales or in control of the heir's office. The centralization proposal changed that calculation by threatening the independence Diana wanted him to defend. This meeting connected her warning to a policy William now had the power to stop. Anne unlocked the box and removed an analog microcassette, a packet of dated letters, copied briefing memoranda, and press contact logs. She placed the papers beside the recorder, inserted the tape, and pressed play. Before bringing the material to Windsor, Anne arranged a confidential, archival examination. It confirmed the cassette's continuity, dated the papers, and found no alterations. The review did not prove Diana's interpretation, but it established that the material required examination. The recorder released a brief hiss of static before Diana's voice came through clearly. No one moved. William's jaw clenched. Catherine focused on the recorder. Camilla locked her hands together, while Charles stared at the packet of documents Anne had placed beside him. Diana spoke directly to William. She identified courtiers, detailed court strategies, and explained how the institution would try to separate him from his own judgment. The greatest danger to his marriage and future reign, she said, would come from inside the palace walls, from people who put personal status above the integrity of the family. William, the recorded voice continued, steady and unhurried, if you are listening to this, it means you are preparing to step into the role you were born to fill. Do not let them turn you into a caretaker for their machine. They will say that survival requires silence, and that sacrificing your personal convictions is the price of keeping the crown. I learned too late that the institution feeds on that silence. Diana's tape detailed specific incidents from the mid-1990s. She recounted how private family arguments were leaked to national newspapers to gain leverage during divorce negotiations. She identified palace advisors who presented themselves as allies while feeding stories to tabloid editors. At the center of the message, Diana laid out the long-term objective of the court faction surrounding Charles and Camilla. She explained that once public opposition to their relationship softened, the court would normalize Camilla's authority by reducing Diana's place in royal history. Patronages, archival records, and commemorations would then be altered until Camilla's position appeared inevitable. The tape carried Diana's account. The papers supplied corroboration. Dates in her letters matched meetings listed in the press contact logs, while copied memoranda contained the same phrases that later appeared in newspaper coverage. The material did not prove every motive Diana described, but it showed that her warning rested on identifiable events rather than memory alone. Diana explained that palace media strategy created divisions between relatives, leaving them dependent on private secretaries and communications officers. Her account described a system that gained power whenever family members stopped speaking directly to one another. They will repeat this inside your household by creating friction between your office and your father's. Your wife will become a target if her public standing eclipses theirs. Build your own firewall, William, and never place your private communications under the control of the central court apparatus. The cassette ended with a sharp mechanical click. William looked toward the dated memoranda, then back at the silent recorder. His breathing turned shallow. His grip slipped from the table as his legs failed beneath him, sending him heavily to his knees. Catherine moved with him and placed one hand across his back before his body pitched forward. Charles rose halfway from his chair, but William raised one hand to stop him. Anne remained steady beside the recorder. Camilla's face lost its color as the dated records and copied briefing language lay exposed across the table. Throughout his adult life, William had accepted compromises in the name of family unity. Public events beside Charles, shared engagements with Camilla, and carefully approved statements maintained the image of a settled household. William also tolerated advisors who had served the institution during Diana's isolation because he believed continuity required restraint. The tape forced him to confront a harder conclusion. His silence had allowed the system's habits to survive around the family he was responsible for protecting. The supporting pages made that conclusion personal. The memoranda described separate briefings designed to create tension between royal offices, including a proposal to answer criticism of Charles by releasing private details about Diana. William recognized the structure because versions of it had appeared around his own household. Catherine's schedule, boundaries created for the children, and private caution had all been recast as disobedience, laziness, or weakness. His thoughts moved to George, Charlotte, and Louis. William had spent years trying to give them stability without allowing royal duty to consume their childhood. Diana's warning exposed the danger of leaving that protection in the hands of officials who treated family pressure as useful media material. William's concern shifted from his own endurance to the future of his family. He had to decide whether palace officials would shape his children, isolate Catherine, and define his reign before it began. Catherine understood the danger in the room. Calling medical staff without William's consent would bring aides, security officers, and communications officials through the door. The moment those officials entered, his collapse would become an internal report open to interpretation. She kept one hand against his back, checked that he remained conscious, and asked whether he needed medical help. William shook his head. Catherine then instructed the private secretary to keep the doors closed while she helped him regulate his breathing. Charles watched the exchange with strain. Diana's recording accused a system built around his former household. while the documents showed methods that had continued beyond her death. Disputing Diana's interpretation would not erase the dates placed before him. He also saw Catherine protect William without turning his distress into a public scene. Catherine's quiet protection stood in direct contrast to the palace system of information control, giving Queen Elizabeth's note greater force. Anne allowed the silence to hold. She had not preserved the box to humiliate Charles or hand William a weapon against Camilla. Diana's instruction required judgment, and Anne had waited until William controlled a household capable of responding through policy rather than rage. An earlier disclosure would have left William emotionally exposed and institutionally dependent. Anne's chosen timing placed responsibility directly in his hands. He had evidence to examine, authority to protect his office, and a family whose future required a decision. The tape alone could not deliver a legal verdict against Camilla. Combined with the letters and briefing records, however, it showed that Diana's fears were grounded in documented events rather than emotional suspicion. Charles now faced a documented pattern involving advisors connected to his former household, while Camilla faced questions that public rehabilitation could not answer. As Catherine held William steady, Anne removed one final paper from the box. It carried Queen Elizabeth II's private seal and the date of her 2021 review. Anne explained that she had taken Diana's material to the Queen during a private meeting at Windsor. Elizabeth listened to the full recording, examined the supporting pages, and returned everything to Anne. She did not order publication or convert the box into an official archive. She added a personal judgment for William to read when Anne finally delivered it. The note carried no legal or constitutional authority. It expressed Elizabeth's private judgment rather than proving Diana's accusations or directing William's response. Its importance came from Elizabeth's knowledge of palace operations and her decision to treat Diana's warnings seriously. Anne read Elizabeth's sentence aloud. Catherine will be the pillar that holds William's household together. Trust her judgment when the old system demands silence. The wording removed all doubt about whom Elizabeth meant. She had watched Catherine work inside the institution, protect her children, and maintain discipline under pressure. Her note expressed personal confidence in Catherine without changing her formal position inside the monarchy. Charles read the sentence twice. He understood that his mother had recognized the weakness Diana described. Centralized communications became dangerous whenever institutional loyalty displaced honesty within the family. The note did not settle the dispute, but Charles could no longer treat William's resistance as youthful defiance. Catherine remained focused on William. She offered no speech and made no attempt to use Elizabeth's words against Camilla. Her steady support gave William the physical anchor he needed to slow his breathing and regain control. Looking from the recorder to the corroborating pages, William understood that the message was not designed to destroy him. Diana had preserved her account so he could recognize the methods surrounding his family and judge them using evidence. After regaining control, he rose slowly beside Catherine and faced his father. The collapse had ended, but the decision now belonged to him. Diana's warning and Elizabeth's endorsement had not expanded William's powers. They had shown him why he needed to defend the independence his office already possessed. Addressing Charles directly, William kept his voice quiet as he separated his administrative decision from any accusation of criminal guilt. From this moment forward, William said, the Wales household will operate independently. No joint communications plan, staffing decision, or access to our private schedules will proceed without written approval from Catherine and me. Any advisor who briefs against this family will lose access to our office. Charles asked whether William was rejecting the Crown's authority. William answered that he was protecting the established independence of the Prince of Wales's office, not challenging the sovereign. Charles looked toward the centralization papers and instructed his secretary to suspend the proposal pending an independent review. Camilla challenged Diana's recording as a one-sided account. Anne directed her to the dated letters and copied memoranda. Charles said the material required examination and suspended every measure connected to the centralization proposal until that review was complete. Camilla offered no answer to the matching dates. The meeting produced immediate changes within William's existing household authority. His mother's warning explained the risk. Elizabeth's note reinforced his trust in Catherine, and the supporting records justified a formal review. William withdrew the Wales office from the joint communications initiatives drafted by the King's private team. The proposed centralized system would have given senior courtiers final editorial control over Wales media releases. Charles's decision to suspend the proposal left Kensington Palace in control of its press office, digital channels, and media strategy. William also strengthened security and information protocols for his staff. Advisors signed updated confidentiality agreements, and a new compliance process reviewed unauthorized contact between Wales employees and tabloid journalists. Off-the-record briefings were prohibited. Within his office, William formalized Catherine's joint approval over senior appointments, public campaigns, and communications policy inside the Wales office. The change recognized the partnership he already relied upon instead of inventing a new constitutional position for her. This restructuring reflected Elizabeth's advice without treating her note as law. William built a protective boundary around his family through decisions that already belonged to the Prince of Wales. The impact was felt immediately across the broader royal institution. Courtiers who had built their careers on managing internal rivalries found their influence blocked from the Wales household. The traditional power centers within Buckingham Palace lost their ability to dictate terms to the heir to the throne. William and Catherine shifted greater attention toward direct public engagements, carefully managed documentary access, digital communications, and long-term community projects. Their independent strategy reduced the influence of tabloid intermediaries over the Wales household. Anne closed the box and collected the recorder. Her promise to Diana had been kept. She had protected the material through previous family crises because Diana's instruction depended on timing. William now possessed the maturity, family responsibility, and household authority needed to respond without turning private grief into reckless retaliation. By delivering the box in front of Charles, Camilla, and Catherine, Anne completed her duty to Diana and honored the confidence Queen Elizabeth later placed in her. William did not leave the room defeated. Supported by Catherine and armed with Diana's testimony, Elizabeth's advice, and the corroborating records, he left prepared to lead his household on his own terms. The incomplete history William had carried into the drawing room was replaced by evidence that clarified his response and strengthened his partnership with Catherine. His collapse was not presented as proof of weakness. It marked the instant grief became action, and inherited silence lost its authority over him. What do you think Diana wanted William to understand through her final message? Was Anne right to protect it until he possessed the authority to act? Share your view below, then subscribe for more direct royal investigations.